Hey everyone, welcome back. We're going deep today.
Yeah, deep.
Into the aftermath of those just devastating fires that just ripped through Southern California.
Oh, man.
In January. We all remember the images. I mean, Malibu, Pacific Palisades.
Horrible.
Parts of LA County just engulfed in flames. It was a horrific scene. And tragically, 29 lives were lost. And thousands of homes and businesses reduced to ashes. And now, in the middle of all these recovery efforts, there's this major political shakeup. LA Mayor Karen Bass has fired Fire Chief Kristin Crowley.
Yeah, the timing of this decision is really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
It seems like it's not just about the immediate response, to the fires, but what's been going on in the weeks since. This move by Mayor Bass really points to a much bigger story, one about accountability, leadership, and potentially some issues within the city's emergency response system.
Exactly. So we hear these numbers.
Yeah.
Like 23,000 acres burned in the Palisades fire alone.
Right.
But it's hard to really grasp that scale of devastation.
Yeah.
What does that number even mean, like in real world terms?
Well, those numbers can feel kind of abstract. To put it into perspective. While the Palisades fire was smaller in acreage than the Camp Fire back in 2018, the destruction it caused is truly staggering. Over 6,800 structures were destroyed. And the Eaton fire north of Pasadena, though smaller in acreage, would have been more destructive.
Wow.
Claiming over 9,400 structures. We're talking about thousands of families displaced, businesses ruined, and a landscape just forever altered. The recovery from this level of damage will take years.
Right.
Maybe even decades.
It's hard to even imagine. And then you have this bombshell from Mayor Bass.
Oh, yeah.
She claims that 1,000 firefighters who could have been battling these blazes were sent home.
Oh, wow.
The very morning that the fires broke out.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a huge number of firefighters, and we all know how crucial those early hours are in containing a wildfire. What kind of impact could this decision have had on the initial response?
Well, it's impossible to say for sure, but the potential impact is certainly significant. You're absolutely right. Those first few hours are critical. Containing a fire in its early stages can literally mean the difference between a 500 acres burned and thousands. Having 1,000 additional firefighters on hand could have drastically changed the course of events, potentially limiting the spread of the fires and reducing the overall destruction.
And there's more. Mayor Bass also alleges that Chief Crowley refused to create an after-action report, essentially hindering efforts to investigate what went wrong. Why are these reports so crucial in situations like this?
They're essential for a number of reasons. Think of it like a debriefing after a major operation. After-action reports allow officials to thoroughly examine what went well, what didn't, and how to improve response efforts in the future. They're really a critical tool for learning from tragedies like this and preventing them from happening again. Without them, we're essentially flying blind, unable to identify and correct potential weaknesses in our emergency response systems. So this lack of an after-action report is a major red flag.
Okay, but it gets even more complicated.
Oh, really?
Mayor Bass also claims that Chief Crowley never contacted her about the fires, even though she had her personal cell number.
Wow.
And they had a history of direct communication during emergencies. Isn't that a pretty serious allegation?
It certainly is. If this is true, it suggests a potentially catastrophic breakdown in communication at the highest levels of city government. And in a crisis situation, as we've been discussing, clear and direct communication can literally be a matter of life and death. This raises serious questions about the chain of command and the protocols in place for handling emergencies of this magnitude.
And adding fuel to the fire, Chief Crowley has publicly criticized the mayor, accusing her of failing the city.
Oh, wow.
In her response to the fires. So now we have this very public he said, she said situation.
Yeah.
With incredibly high stakes. How do we even begin to make sense of these conflicting accounts?
That's where critical thinking becomes really crucial. We need to consider the different perspectives at play here and understand that there are likely motivations behind these conflicting accounts. We need to ask ourselves, what pressures was each leader facing in the heat of the moment? What information did they have at the time? It's not about assigning blame or taking sides. It's about understanding the complexities of decision-making when you're faced with such a massive and fast-moving disaster.
That's an important point. So we have this very public dismissal, these accusations flying back and forth.
Yeah.
Where does the city go from here? Who's in charge now?
Well, the mayor has appointed Ronnie Villanueva as the interim fire chief. He's a 41-year veteran of the LAFD.
Wow. And
was actually the chief deputy of emergency operations before he retired just 7 months ago.
Wow, he came out of retirement for this.
Exactly, and that speaks volumes, doesn't it? They needed someone with experience, someone they could trust to step in and steady the ship during this very turbulent transition period. His appointment suggests the gravity of the situation and the urgency to restore confidence in the department's leadership.
And what happens next?
Mayor Bass has announced she'll be conducting a national search for a permanent fire chief, emphasizing the need for community input in the selection process. This is a crucial decision, and I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot more about it in the coming weeks and months. Finding the right person for this job, someone who can rebuild trust within the department and with the community, will be paramount.
Absolutely. This isn't just about putting out fires. It's about leadership, accountability, rebuilding trust,
right,
and navigating a politically charged landscape.
Precisely. It will be fascinating to see how this search unfolds. Given the intense scrutiny and the political pressure surrounding the situation, choosing the right candidate will be a pivotal moment for the city and its future. And it's important to remember this isn't just about finding, the right person for the job.
Right.
We're talking about systemic issues that may have contributed to this whole crisis.
Yeah.
Remember those 1,000 firefighters sent home?
Yeah.
The alleged communication breakdowns and the missing after-action report. These all point to deeper problems that need to be addressed.
You're raising some really critical points here. So what does this all mean for the future of wildfire response in LA?
Right.
I mean, these fires were incredibly destructive. And with climate change, it's probably safe to say we'll see more extreme weather events like this in the future. So how can the city prepare?
You're absolutely right to connect this to the bigger picture. These fires are a wake-up call for the entire region. We need to be investing in fire prevention measures like clearing brush and creating defensible spaces around homes. We need to improve our early warning systems, ensuring residents have ample time to evacuate. And most importantly, we need to make sure our firefighting resources are adequate, well-trained, and deployed effectively.
That makes a lot of sense. But let's be honest, this situation has also put Mayor Bass in a very difficult position politically.
Yeah.
How do you think this will impact her moving forward?
It's definitely a challenge for her leadership. Her decision to remove Chief Crowley was a bold move, but it's also risky.
Right.
If this national search for a new chief doesn't go smoothly, or if there are more missteps in the city's response to future emergencies, the pressure on her will only intensify. She's under a microscope now, and every decision she makes regarding the LAFD will be heavily scrutinized.
Yeah, it's a tough spot to be in for sure. It really reminds us that leadership in times of crisis is about more than just making easy calls. It's about making tough, sometimes unpopular decisions and accepting the consequences that come with them.
I couldn't agree more. And it's about more than just making decisions. It's about acknowledging mistakes, learning from them, and doing everything possible to prevent them from happening again. That's the kind of leadership that will be essential to building a more resilient Los Angeles, a city that can withstand these growing challenges and come out stronger on the other side.
We've talked about the scale of the fires, the political fallout, the communication breakdowns, and the leadership challenges. But what about the human costs? You mentioned the 29 lives lost.
Right.
Are there any stories that particularly stand out? Anything that highlights the personal impact of this tragedy?
It's crucial to remember that every single life lost represents a story of family in mourning and a void left in the community. You can get caught up in the political back and forth or the logistics of the recovery effort, but we must never lose sight of the individual human beings at the heart of this tragedy. One story that resonates deeply is that of a young family who lost their home in the Palisades fire. The parents and their 2 young children barely escaped with their lives forced to flee in the middle of the night with only the clothes on their backs. They're now living in a temporary shelter, uncertain of what the future holds. Their story, and countless others like it, are a stark reminder of the devastation these fires have left behind.
Hearing that really drives home the point that this is about so much more than acres burned or buildings destroyed. It's about shattered lives and a community grappling with immense loss. And that brings us to another important aspect, the recovery process.
Yeah.
Rebuilding homes, businesses, and lives after a disaster of this magnitude will be a long and challenging process. Where does the city even begin?
It's a daunting task, for sure, but we've seen time and time again that community support plays a vital role in recovery efforts. Neighbors helping neighbors, volunteers lending a hand.
Right.
And the organizations providing resources and assistance make all the difference. That sense of solidarity, of people coming together to rebuild what was lost, can be incredibly powerful.
What specific resources are available to those who have lost their homes or businesses?
There are many organizations working tirelessly to support those affected by the fires. The Red Cross is providing sheltered and basic necessities to those displaced. FEMA is offering financial assistance to help with temporary housing and rebuilding efforts. Local community centers are organizing food drives and collecting clothing donations. And there are countless volunteer groups working on the ground, clearing debris, helping residents salvage belongings, and offering emotional support.
So there's hope.
Absolutely. While the road to recovery will be long and arduous, there are resources available, and there are people who care and want to help. It's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit that even in the face of such immense loss, communities come together, rebuild, and eventually find a way to move forward.
That's a powerful thought. Okay, so we've talked about the scale of the fires, the political fallout, the leadership challenges, the human cost, and the long road to recovery.
Yeah.
As we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'm feeling kind of a mix of emotions.
Yeah.
It's hard to be optimistic after such a tragedy, but I'm also seeing glimmers of hope in the stories of resilience and the outpouring of community support. What about you? What are your thoughts as we move into the final part of our discussion?
I share your sentiments. It's impossible to ignore the devastation and the immense challenges ahead. But I'm also struck by the strength and determination of those affected by these fires. As we delve deeper into the final part of our deep dive, I think it's important to consider not just the immediate aftermath, but also the long-term implications of these events. How will these fires reshape the landscape of Southern California? What lessons can we learn from this tragedy to better prepare for future disasters? And how can we, as individuals and as a community, contribute to a more resilient and sustainable future?
Those are some great questions. Let's take a quick break and we'll come back to explore those ideas in our final segment. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here: the immediate response to the fires, the long road to recovery, the political fallout, the human cost, and the leadership challenges facing the city.
Right.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I keep coming back to this question of accountability.
Yeah.
Who or what is ultimately responsible for the scale of this disaster?
That's a complex question with no easy answers. On one hand, you have the actions or inactions of individuals in leadership positions, the mayor, the former fire chief, and the choices they made in the heat of the moment. But on the other hand, you have these systemic issues we've discussed: potential understaffing, communication breakdowns, and gaps in emergency preparedness.
Right.
These factors all may have contributed to the severity of the situation.
Yeah.
So where do we draw the line? How do we balance individual accountability with recognizing the systemic challenges that may have set people up for failure?
It's like trying to untangle this giant knot.
Right.
You can't ignore choices made by those in charge.
Yeah.
But you also can't ignore the larger context in which those choices were made.
Right.
It feels like we need to examine both the individual decisions and the systemic factors to truly understand what happened and prevent future tragedies.
Exactly. And that's where the real work lies.
Yeah.
It's not enough to just point fingers or assign blame.
Right.
We need to take a holistic view.
Right.
Looking at the entire system, identifying vulnerabilities, and implementing meaningful reforms.
This includes investing in fire prevention measures, strengthening communication protocols, ensuring adequate staffing and resources for emergency responders, and fostering a culture of preparedness within the community. So it's not just about holding individuals accountable.
Right.
It's about holding the system itself accountable.
Yeah.
And making the necessary changes to create a more resilient city.
Precisely. It's about moving beyond the blame game and working collaboratively to build a safer future.
Yeah.
And that's something we can all participate in.
Okay, so what can we as informed citizens do to be part of that process?
First and foremost, stay engaged, follow the news, attend community meetings, and make your voices heard. Let your elected officials know that this issue matters to you. You expect transparency and accountability from those in leadership positions.
And it's not just about holding others accountable, right?
Right.
It's also about taking responsibility for our own preparedness.
Absolutely. We all have a role to play in building a more resilient community.
Yeah.
Take steps to prepare your own homes and families for potential disasters.
Right.
Develop an evacuation plan, assemble a go bag with essential supplies, know your evacuation routes, and sign up for emergency alerts.
Right.
These simple actions can make a huge difference in an emergency situation.
Those are all great tips. And what about those who want to help with the recovery efforts? Are there ways to get involved?
There are many ways to contribute.
Yeah.
Numerous organizations are providing support to those affected by the fires.
Right.
You can donate money to the LEAF organizations, volunteer your time at local shelters or community centers, or simply offer a listening ear and a helping hand to those who are struggling.
Yeah.
Even small acts of kindness can go a long way in helping communities heal and rebuild.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm feeling a sense of, well, not exactly optimism,
Yeah.
but maybe a glimmer of hope.
Right.
It's hard to feel positive in the face of such immense loss.
Yeah.
But I'm also seeing incredible resilience, a determination to rebuild, and a recognition that we need to learn from this experience and do better in the future.
I share that sentiment. It's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the human spirit has an incredible capacity for resilience, compassion, and innovation. By working together, by holding ourselves and our leaders accountable, and by embracing a commitment to preparedness and collective action, we can build a stronger, safer, and more resilient Los Angeles for everyone.
That's a powerful message to end on. To our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. It's been a heavy topic, but an important one. Stay informed, stay engaged, and stay hopeful.
And remember, even in the face of adversity, there's always the potential for growth, change, and a brighter future.